What's going on, guys? In this video we're going to experiment with a little bit of two-factor authentication with Node.js and a library called Speakeasy. So two-factor authentication basically allows for an additional layer of security on top of your basic email and password authentication. And what we're going to implement is something called a time-based one-time password, or TOTP. And we're going to use the Speakeasy library to do that. We're not going to do the username and password thing. This is something you would add on top of that. And this is also the back end. We're going to be working with Node and Express. I might make a video in the future creating a user interface where we can implement like a QR code and so on. But basically we're going to be able to register a user and add a secret to the database with that user, and then get a code from something like Google Authenticator, and then submit another request to a separate route where we can verify that code against the token in the database. Now, this video is actually based on a written tutorial on the LogRocket blog from Jeremy Catome. So I'll have the link to this in the description. It tells you a little bit more about two-factor authentication, and most of the code we're going to write is very similar to what we have here. A couple things will be different, but you can use this as a reference as well. And check out LogRocket service. They're not sponsoring this video, but they did give me permission to basically create a video version of this tutorial. And LogRocket does, it helps with debugging. It allows users to be recorded. User actions are recorded, so you can see where issues arise and stuff like that. So great service. I also have the Speakeasy GitHub open here, so we will refer to this to generate our secret. If you're building the front end, you can display a QR code. We need to verify the token that's in the database. So we'll reference this a little bit. And then for a database, we're just going to use this Node.js DB. It's very simple. It's just basically just stores your data in a JSON file. However, it doesn't matter which database you're using. It could be Postgres or MongoDB or just about anything. You're just going to store the secret in the database with the user, and then you're going to validate the passcode or the token against that. And you're going to get the passcode from something like Google Authenticator. I'm going to use this Authenticator Chrome extension, but you could use the mobile app, or there's other ways to do it as well. So let's go ahead and jump into VS Code, and I just have my integrated terminal open here. And the first thing we'll do is initialize the package.json with npm init and add the -y so that we can skip the questions. And I'm going to assume that you have some basic knowledge of Node.js, Express, and npm. So from here, let's install any dependencies we're going to use. So we'll install Express. We're going to install the Speakeasy library. We're going to install something called UUID to generate a universal unique ID for the user, and then also node-json-db. And again, you could do this with any database at all. This is just a simple solution for this video. So I also want to install nodemon as a dev dependency. So npm install -d nodemon. That way we don't have to keep, restarting the server when we make a change. And then in our package.json, you can see our dependencies have been installed. Let's go ahead and just add a start script here. And we'll go ahead and just run nodemon index, because we're going to call our entry point index.js. So let's go ahead and create that index.js. And let's start off by just creating a basic Express server. So we'll go ahead and require Express. And then let's initialize Express. And then we want to listen on a specific port, which I'm going to actually create a variable here called port. And we want to first check our environment variables, so process.env.port. If that doesn't exist, then we'll use 5000, and then let's pass that in here, along with a function that will just console.log, some backticks, and we'll say server running on port, and money sign curly braces, and then our port. All right, and we'll just create a very simple route here just to get this up and going. So we'll make a GET request to /API, and we're just going to run a function, request response here, and let's just respond with JSON, with res.json, and just pass in a JSON object with a message, and we'll just say welcome to the two-factor authentication example. All right, so we'll save that, and we should be able to run this with npm start. Okay, so it's watching on 5,000. I'm going to go to Postman. That's what I'm using to make my request, and I'll make a GET request to HTTP localhost 5000/API, and we should see our message with a status of 200 OK. All right, good. So now let's bring in the rest of our dependencies. So we'll just go ahead and copy this down. We want to bring in the Speakeasy library. We want to bring in UUID. We're going to use that to generate a user ID because Node.js doesn't do that on its own. And then for, let's see, I want to just check the documentation for Node.js. So here they're importing JSONDB from here, config from here. This is the ES module syntax. So what we'll do is just, I'll copy that, we'll just convert it. So instead of import, this is going to be const. And instead of saying from, we just want to do equals require. Okay, and then same thing here. Let's say const equals require. All right, so I brought that in. Wait, what did I do here? That should be on the outside. Okay, now to initialize a database with Node.js, we're going to go right under where we initialized our app, and let's say const db, and we do this by initializing an instance of JSONDB, which takes in a config instance, and that takes in a couple arguments. First will be the name of the database, we'll call it my database, and then second is we're going to say true, which relates to when we do a push. So when we do db.push, we want it to save. If we don't put true here, if we have false, then we're gonna have to add another save method in addition to push. False, this has to do with having it be human readable, and then the separator is going to be a slash, which I believe is the default. All right, now if we just go ahead and save this and it runs, notice up here, over here, we have a mydatabase.json file. So this is essentially our database. Now the first route that we're going to create, in addition to this, this dummy route here, is going to be to register a user. So let's say register user, and we want to create a temporary secret. So the way it's going to work is we register a user. It's just going to be an ID and the temp secret. And once the user is registered, we'll create another route to verify, where we can then use the authenticator to get a token, and we can then verify that token against the temporary secret in the database. And if it validates, or if it verifies, then we're going to change it from temp secret to just secret. And then we'll have a final route where we can just validate with any token from the authenticator. Okay, and if that makes no sense, don't worry about it. We're going to go through it. So this is going to be a post request to /API/register. And obviously we don't have like username and password. You would do that as well here. So the first thing we're going to do here is get an ID for this user, for this record. And we're going to use UUID for that, which has a method called v4. We're going to generate a version 4 of this universal unique identifier. And then the way that this database works, this Node.js is we create a path. Now I'm going to put all this in a try catch. So here, let's create a path, and this is going to be, let's do /user/ and then the ID that's going to be generated. And what we want to put in this is just the ID and a temporary secret that's generated from Speakeasy. So we already have the ID, so we could do a db.push, and push is going to take in the path and then whatever we want to save in the database, which is going to be an object with the ID. Now to get the temporary secret, let's say const temp underscore secret, and we can use Speakeasy, which has a method called generate secret. And then we're going to put that in the database as well. So let's say temp secret. And then to respond, let's do a res.json. So this push will actually add it to the database, or in our case, the JSON file. And then for the response, I want to respond with the ID, so the user ID, and then the temp secret, but I want to call it secret. So we'll say secret colon and then temp secret. All right, if something goes wrong down here, let's go ahead and console log the error and also reply with or respond with a status of 500, and we'll add on JSON here and a message and just say error generating the secret. Okay, so that should register a user with an ID and whatever the generated secret is. So I'm going to go over to Postman. I'll just use the same tab and make a post request to API/register. And like I said, you would normally send your username and password along with this as well to get put into the database. So I'm going to send, and what I get back here is an ID. And oh, you know what? I wanted to only send the base 32 version of this, because secret is actually an object with ASCII, hex, base 32, and then this OTP auth URL, which you can actually use for a QR code on the front end. And that's in the documentation right here. So displaying a QR code, you would use the OTP auth URL, but we're not doing that. So I did want to just respond with the base 32. So what I'm going to do is, let's see, in the mydatabase.json here, you can see we have the path is the user ID. We have the ID here, and then we have temp secret with these different, ASCII, hex, and so on. So I'm just going to clear out the database by just putting it back to an empty object. So we now essentially cleared the database. And when I return this secret right here, I'm going to say .base32. So now if I go and I register a user again, I'm going to get ID and then the secret, which is the base32 form. And if we look in my database.json, you can see we have a user. All right, so now that we've registered and we're able to get the secret, I want to have another route to verify. I want to be able to get a token from the authenticator and verify it against that secret. So here, let's say this is going to verify token, and it's also going to make the secret permanent. So I'm going to change the key from temp secret to just secret. All right, so let's do app.post. It's going to be a post request to /API/verify. So the first thing we're going to do here is get from the request.body, because we're going to be sending a token and we're going to be sending a user ID. Now to use request.body with Express, you have to add a piece of middleware. So I'm going to go up to the top here and just say app.use express.json, like that. Okay, and then I'm going to just use destructuring to pull from request body. So we want to pull from that the token and the user ID. Okay, once we have that, let's open up a try catch. And in here, we want to again create a path. That's how this database works. So let's say path equals, and it's going to be /user/ and then whatever that user ID is. Okay, and then we want to fetch the user. So let's create a variable called user. And we're going to set that to db dot, and then there's a method called getData, and we just simply pass in the path. So it's going to get a user with whatever the ID that's passed in here. All right, and if it can't find it, it'll throw an error, and we'll handle that in a minute. So with that user, once we get that, let's go ahead and take from, because remember we have this user.temp underscore secret, right? That's stored in our database. So I'm going to take the base 32. So just destructuring base 32 from the temp secret, because remember that's an object with ASCII base 32 and some of the other stuff. And I'm just going to rename it to secret. Okay, so I'm just pulling out the base 32 version, which is this right here, and I'm putting it into a variable called secret. Now I need to verify it, and we use Speakeasy to do that. So let's go over to the documentation here where it says verifying the token, and we want to call this TOTP.verify and pass in a couple things. So I'm just going to grab this right here, and let's paste that in here, and I'm just going to change this to const. So we want to verify, and then I renamed it to secret here, so there's no reason for this. We just want secret. Encoding is base 32, and then token is going to be the token from the body. So it's just called token. We don't need that user token. And that should verify it, and then this will be either true or false based on if it passes or not. So let's say if it's verified, then I do want to just respond. So res.json, and we'll respond with verified true. But I also want, before we make the response, I want to change temp secret, the key of temp secret, to just secret in the database. So we can do that with db.push, pass in our path, and then we want to save the ID is obviously going to be the user ID, and then the secret. So now we're saving a key of secret instead of temp secret, but it's going to be the same as user.tempSecret. Okay, and then we'll do an else here. So if it's not verified, if it doesn't pass, then we'll res.json, and let's pass in here verified and set that to false, and then you would just handle that in your front end however you'd like. So in the catch here, let's just copy, we'll copy this. So if it can't find the user, it'll run this. So we'll say error finding user. All right, so now what I'm going to do is go back to Postman, and I'm going to register a new user. So if I click send here, you can see I have a new ID and a new secret. And if I go over to my database.json, I have two users. Okay, so I have, let's see, where does it start? So this ends here. Yeah, so I have ID. So user object, I know this is formatted really weird. Let's actually copy this and let's say JSON formatter, and let's paste that in and process. So I just want to show you the structure of this. So we have basically it's like a collection, right? We have a user collection with an ID, and so the ID is the path, and then we have the actual ID field. We have the temp secret for the first user. The second user also has a temp secret. Now I'm gonna go ahead and try to verify this user, and if I do, this should then change to just secret instead of temp secret. That way that will be stored in the database, and we can continuously validate passcodes or tokens from this authenticator. All right, so let's make another request. I'm going to go back to Postman, and I'm just going to copy this and open up another tab here. Post request to verify, and this time we want to add some body data. So I'm going to use raw JSON, and we want to pass in here the user ID that we're trying to verify, and it's going to be user ID, because remember in here, let's see, so from request.body we want user ID and then our token. All right, so for the user ID, let's copy this. So this is the second user that I registered, the ID. I'm going to pass that in here. Now for the token, this is where the authenticator comes in. So the secret that we get back, we're going to grab that, Copy that, and then I'm going to go to my Authenticator, which I already have installed as a Chrome extension. You could also do this in your mobile app. And if we click this pencil icon and plus, we have two options. One is to scan a QR code, which you could do if you were creating a user interface for this, which I'll most likely do in a different video. And then manual entry, which we're going to go ahead and paste our secret in, and then the issuer will just say 2FA Speakeasy, and click OK, and that's going to give us this token. So if I click it, it gets copied, and we'll go back to Postman and go back to verify, and let's add in the body here token, and then just paste in our token that we got from the Authenticator, and if I send, we get verified true. So we got verified true, which means it should have updated the database from temp secret, change that label to secret. So if we go back to my database.json, you can see now we have just secret instead of temp secret. And obviously the process of updating a field like that would be different depending on the database and the ORM you're using, but that's how we would do it with Node.json DB. Now I want one final route to continuously validate tokens or passcodes from the Authenticator to the user. So I'm going to actually copy this whole verify route because it's pretty similar, and paste that in. And then let's change this comment here. So this is going to validate the token, and we're going to call this route API validate. And again, we're going to get the token and the user ID. Then down here, we want to retrieve the user from the database. We're doing that. We want to get the secret, although now it's going to be just secret, right? User.secret, not temp secret. And then here, instead of calling this verified, I'm going to call this token validates. Okay, so it'll just take in the secret, the encoding, the token, and then we also have a time window, which I'm going to set to 1. And then here, instead of checking verified, we want to check for token validates. And we don't need to update the database and change the key or anything. We just want to respond with verified. Actually, we'll say validated. So validated true or validated false. And then down here, we'll just keep that as is. So let's save that, and now I should be able to continuously validate with passcodes or tokens. So let's copy this and go over here, and let's see, we want a post request to validate, and then in the body we want raw JSON, and I'm going to grab this, paste that in. Okay, now if I send that, it's false. This is no longer valid. So I'll go over to my Authenticator, and you'll see this little countdown thing. Every time this hits the end, this is going to change. So it continuously changes. But yeah, I'm going to wait till this one changes. So you can see that's almost done, and there we go. So we get a new code. I'm going to just copy that, and let's add that here, and I should be able to validate. Good, validated true. If this was anything else, false. Okay, so now we have the ability to use the Authenticator for two-factor authentication. All right, so hopefully this taught you guys a little bit about how this works. Obviously, this is just a simple example. It's not integrated into an actual application with a username and a password and a real database, but it gives you an idea of how the Speakeasy library works and how you can generate a token, store it, and then match. Store a secret and then match the token or the passcode, whatever you want to call it, against that token for two-factor authentication. All right, so that's it, guys. Again, I'll put the article from LogRocket in the description if you want to read a little bit more about it. But that's it. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.